Hello, good morning, and welcome to Galway Politics Live. My name is Niall Brolcháin, and I'm joined here by three august politicians in Galway, and Mike Geraghty, my co-host. Hello, Mike.
Good morning.
Good
Neil.
morning.
Good morning, viewers.
Okay, if we'd like to introduce yourselves, Seán first.
Yeah, Seán Kyne, TD is my name, TD since 2011, Minister of State at the Department of Culture, Heritage and the Gael, and also Government Chief Whip.
Pauline.
I'm Pauline O'Reilly. I'm a newly elected Green Party councillor in Galway City Council, and I'm the candidate for the general election for whenever that arrives. That might be a discussion for another day, for Galway West. Delighted to be here.
Okay.
Good morning, viewers. Peter Keane is my name. I'm a councillor in the Galway City West Ward, elected first in 2009, just undertaking my third term in Galway City Council.
Okay, and Mike, my co-host here. Any wisdom from you, Mike, this morning?
Welcome to the inaugural broadcast of Galway Politics Live. We're delighted to have you guys with us. We hope you'll take part and use Twitter and Facebook and come in with some comments. We have some questions already for the candidates. So you're all elected, so you're not candidates anymore, so congratulations, guys.
Thank you.
And it's great to have the three of you guys with us this morning. So we look for a good, frank debate. And take it away, Neil.
Okay, well, we're really looking for, the idea of this format really is we're looking for traffic solutions. We're not looking to sort of just highlight the problems. We need to look at the problems first and what causes traffic in city. I think anybody who stood in the recent local elections will be well aware that this is probably the number one issue facing the city at the moment. It's also an issue in the county. I mean, Seán is from the Cllr area, and he'll be well aware that in the morning, a lot of people from Cllr commute into Galway City. And indeed, there are towns right around Galway, that people will commute into the city in the morning. So it's not just an issue for people living in the city, it's an issue for all of Galway. But the city is the focal point, really, of the traffic problems we have. So, this is, you see behind us ourselves and the three candidates. But there was a recent survey from INRIC's research, and it showed that Galway City is the worst congested traffic city in Ireland. So, I mean, does anybody have any wisdom as to why that might be the case, or does any of you sort of have any sort of insight into that?
Well, I think if I could just jump in, I mean, certainly Galway has the reputation as being, the worst, or certainly one of the worst in terms of traffic congestion. And I think partly because of the makeup of the city. Mm-hmm. Beautiful city, beautiful location. You have the sea and you have Loch Corrib, and you have a narrow corridor between both. Part of it, there's little development in terms of near the Corrib, obviously, because it's restricted and it's protected. So you have a very narrow corridor, and you have a city nearly in a sort of a shape of an 8, then with the narrow point whereby traffic has to get through. So I think in terms of road traffic, that's part of the problem. We have certain advantages. We have Kent Station, which is right at the heart of the city. So anybody taking a train journey will get directly into the heart of Galway City, into Eyre Square. So that's a wonderful advantage, and that I think helps, and I think is part of the solution in terms of further improvements to the quality of life in Galway City. And I'm a strong advocate of the Western Rail Corridor. The first phase has been positive. I think there are opportunities into the future for that, and I think that can take some of the pressure. You talked about places like Cllr, Galway. I think we can be looking at issues like doubling the track between Athenry, Ordenmore and Galway City. So all that can improve. It can improve the flow of people from the county, the city, and around the city.
Yeah, so Pauline, do you have any insights into the traffic problems?
I wouldn't disagree with a lot of what Seán has said there. I think that we have to also highlight that one of the biggest problems is the infrastructural problem, a planning legacy issue that we have, where we have huge amounts of people living on the west side of the city and trying to get across to the east side of the city for work is one issue. We also have, the majority of the transport during school time is people bringing their children to school. So there are infrastructural problems there around the fact that it's more expensive to get the bus, it's more difficult to get the bus, it's not leaving when people are actually trying to get their children to school. There's no safe cycling infrastructure, so it leaves people with very few alternatives. And also, I think critically, we have to look at the planning, that if we really want to transform the city, it's not just about putting in new corridors, and I wouldn't disagree with the corridor, but new corridors, it's also about regenerating the city. And any good planners around Europe will tell you that that's what you need to do. Have people living in the city, have the kind of amenities that they want there. And also in Knocknacarrow, there's no library, there's no civic spaces. So people are constantly leaving their areas in cars to get to even the most basic of amenities.
Yeah, Peter, you've been a councillor for a while now, and I mean, you must have had it in the neck from lots of your constituents as to what the situation is with the traffic.
I have indeed, Niall, and your survey is absolutely correct. I mean, we are the most congested city in Western Europe. It's appalling the way that people have to lose hours and hours of their lives in traffic. I think the panel members here, the Minister and Councillor, are absolutely right. The spread is wrong. I think predominantly in the west of the city the people are living. Industry is based predominantly in the east of the city, and as the Minister correctly alluded to there's a pinch point in the middle of the city. I think it's more than future planning. I think it's past planning also. I think we spoke off camera earlier on about the fact that 23% of people are actually walking in the city, which I'm amazed at in terms of commuting to work. 60% of people are using their cars, and there needs to be a modal shift in that regard. And I think that therein lies the challenge for us. Just to echo what Pauline is saying, to create the corridors, to focus more on cycling and public transport. But we are a medieval city. We're a narrow streetscape city. We're a city where predominantly 55% of the people working in the city are living in the county. We have huge challenges, but I genuinely believe that the platform exists. I think the platform exists under the Galway Transportation Strategy. I think it's a radical plan. It's a plan that was adopted by both local authorities in January of 2017, under which some very, as I say, radical plans, if we have the appetite and if we have the vision to pass some of the policies that are contained in that strategy, I think they will certainly alleviate a lot of the problems we have. And that does include the Galway City Outer Ring Road. It does include a huge investment in public transport, and I think that's where the focus needs to be.
That's good, Peter. Thanks. So, okay, we're going to bring the public in now. And our first question is going to be addressed to all three members of the panel. So we'll do it in reverse this time. We'll hit Pete with it first, then Pauline, and then Seán. So, hi, Mike. For this morning's show, you might ask each panellist this question. With Buchanan's 20-year-old land use and transport strategy, which promoted following urban-style housing developments into 38 towns and villages, now discredited, and with the N6 bypass proposals designed to spread traffic sprawl ever further into the county, is it not time to change tack and to introduce more radical public transport solutions such as light rail transit with a ring of linked park and ride sites to help drivers coming in from distant commuter modes? There's a long question here, so it's just want to say who this is from.
I think we get the gist of it, Mike.
It's basically the last, but it's
sort of integrated public transport solution. I
think we're all in favour of that. I mean, certainly, I'm an advocate of light rail if it works. I want to see that we can justify it in terms of the figures. I do know that it is government policy, and I'm not attempting to step on the Minister's toes here, but the bypass, the Galway City Outer Ring Road, has been business costed. It is a plan that's going to cost in the region of €600 million. Bus Connects is another plan which is under the Galway Transportation Strategy, which is another €200 million. And in the introduction of a light rail, we've got to make a commercial argument that will work. I would love to see a light rail system in Galway. I genuinely believe. I make decisions at Galway City Council over the last 10 years based on the best information that I have at any given point in time. That information comes from the experts in the area, traffic management experts, engineers, etc. So I'd love to see it, but I need to be given, an engineering and a financial reason as to why that's going to work. The government has committed, backed by Fianna Fáil in this instance, we've nearly committed €1 billion in promises to solve Galway's traffic problems. The difficulty is that none of that has been implemented to date. Now, we understand that the Galway City Outer Ring Road is in the planning process at the moment. It's on a further information from An Bord Pleanála to the lead authority, which is Galway County Council. the time frame for dealing with the responses to that, and I've met with Europe during the week on this, is the 30th of August. They're confident that they can deal with what's in the FI. So in my view, it's implementation. I love what they're talking about there, Mike. I love that they're talking about light rail. I love that they're talking about park and ride. And we've been slow to implement that, and we've got to take that on our shoulders.
Well, can I just ask you, you're saying it's slow to implement it, but why? Why? What's
and this is a question I ask consistently, and Pauline will see this now when she given that she has come.
The poison chalice to Pauline.
In fact, you made a comment tonight, Pauline, about or I said you'll get that answer in writing, because we are constantly badgering the executive and Galway City Council to implement it. This plan was adopted in January of 2017. We haven't implemented a line of it to date.
But why not?
Because they give you the argument that it has to go through a part-8 planning process, and that's correct too. That's the correct process. But day and night we're screaming to get this done and get it dealt with. Is it a funding issue? Is it an executive issue? Is it a resources issue? I don't know. But my job is to legislate. My job is to devise policy. We have devised it, we have adopted it, and now we're crying for the implementation of the Galway
So just to
Transportation
go back,
Strategy.
Peter, on this for a second, on the light rail, just to let you know the second part of this question was, this question came from one of the 22,500 people that signed Catherine Connolly's petition looking for a light rail solution to Galway's traffic gridlock. And as you say, nothing has happened. But hasn't there been a costing for Glewis?
There has been a costing. I've seen the costing.
And didn't Galway City Council unanimously pass the light rail as an option a few years back?
As I understand, it's been included as an option, but the engineering evidence that we've received in Galway City Council is that it can't be funded, and that we don't have the populations that will use it enough to justify it at the end of the day. I mean, I'd love if Galway City and County, in terms of the environs of the suburbs, had a light rail system. I'd love to see it, and don't think that the Court of Public Opinion doesn't want it, Mike. Of course they do. Yeah. All of us want it, but at the end of the day, as legislators, as policymakers, we have to make decisions based on best of
Just on one final point on Neil, because it's an important one. So you've said there's nearly $1 billion committed to improving our transport solutions, and we seem to be happy enough to say that between 700 million and maybe the billion itself, given the Children's Hospital in Dublin could go on the bypass, would it not have made more sense to look at the light rail option first?
Maybe it would have, but light rail has been looked at, as I understand it. I remember receiving presentations in the last council and the council before it in relation to light rail. We've had Brendan Holland and the team in. I've attended meetings with Catherine Connolly. I've been at the public meetings in Parkhouse. It's a very, very exciting plan. I'd love to see it. I just don't know about the figures on it.
Okay, I'd just like to ask the other two people what their take on this is.
Well, you've asked there about the figures. The figures for light rail that have come in are 280 million, I believe, and I've been to a lot of the Glewis meetings, and the biggest issue. And what I'm calling for is a proper feasibility study, because actually there has been no properly funded feasibility study. There's been ones within that Glewis group, but the government themselves haven't done a feasibility study. So and I know speaking to Arab that they have looked at the issue, but I would have a lot of, I suppose, issues around how much the outer bypass is going to solve the problems. The best estimates is that it would take 25% of the total traffic. That includes not just cars, but it includes the whole, and we've seen that 5% of people walk. It's not facilitating any of that, and it's a huge amount of money. So we now have, and none of us have mentioned so far, a climate emergency. That's what we're really in, and we need radical solutions even within the Galway transport the Galway transport strategy. It's not radical. In my view, it's not radical. It is talking about all of the things that we really need, to have buses every 10 minutes, to have proper digital displays, to have seating. They're all of the things that I spoke to people on the doors about, and they're absolutely essential. But we're continuing to have development on the likes of Letter Road, on the likes of Ballymoneen Road, where no buses are due to come down, and that's not even part of the transport strategy. I know I've seen some of the planning applications there that will talk about, well, we can put in these housing developments because we will in the future have cycling lanes. But we're again doing planning in a topsy-turvy way, years and years waiting for anything to be implemented, and yet the developments go on and on and on, and that's what sprawl really is. You know, and that's what we're going to continue to see unless we actually front load things and put the public transport first. And I'm not saying no to roads, but we need to get the public transport, we need to get cycling infrastructure, we need to get the greenways, and we need to have proper pilot schemes. I would say pilot schemes that can really show people what it's really like to live in a community where you have public realm spaces that you want to be in, that your children are safe in. Around Wood Quay, for instance, I think would be a fantastic amenity. It would mean that people would want to be in the city and not constantly try to travel out of the city.
Okay, I'd like to bring in Seán here, because I mean, you've been a politician, Seán, since 2004, and you know, you've seen you've seen and heard everything that goes on, and you know, obviously there's been a lack of progress we've talked about various solutions potentially here, but I mean, there's a lack of progress probably in all of them. I mean, the Moy-Cullen bypass is something that you've been talking about, and that hasn't happened. You know, we have the city outer bypass, that hasn't happened. People are talking about light rail, that hasn't happened. People are talking about BRT as a solution, that hasn't happened. Now let's be clear, one-hit solutions are not something that tend to work. I mean, we need probably a multiplicity of all of these. Park and ride is something we've been debating for quite some time, and that's not actually rocket science. That's fairly straightforward. The lead time in terms of implementing a park and ride is not very long.
And in fairness, it's only used at Christmas here and maybe the races. You know?
Yeah. So why are we just not making progress in Galway is the question, really.
Well, I think it's, you know, you're correct in terms of a multifaceted approach is required. The Moy-Cullen bypass, just for your information, due to start early next year. Tenders will be started this year. That's not going to solve everything, but it will allow people to get home faster to other areas. And whilst this is a very city-orientated conversation, there is a wider area. There is the county, there is Connemara. There are people who, you know, contribute to the businesses in Galway City, contribute to the rate space of Galway City, but who live in Moy-Cullen, who live in Cllr Galway, who live in Roscahill, and in all these areas. I think one of the most exciting areas that that progress is being made of is in relation to greenways. For example, from Clifton to Cllr to Moy-Cullen. Now, it's not as fast as one would like, certainly in terms of the planning between Cllr, Moy-Cullen and Bushy Park, but the potential there is absolutely huge. And it will happen. It will happen, subject to planning, it will happen. A lot of these things, if planning is achieved, these things will happen. And the vision there is for a wider greenway than your standard one in Connemara or Westport, a wider one, because it will be a commuting corridor. The amount of people in my area, in Moy-Cullen, who work in the university, who work in the hospital, and even for students. So the potential there is huge, and I think that will be a very exciting, and I know there's a lot of demand in relation to Barna, in relation to Cllr Galway, and I know there's work going on between the Moor and the east side. You know, funding was granted on the urban fund as well for that. So that is one of the most exciting potentials that we have. In relation to the bypass, as people know, I've been a long-term supporter of the Galway City Ring Road for that reason, because we need to get cars out of the city who don't want to be in the city, and that frees up other ideas. For example, then you can start talking about putting bus lanes on the Quincentennial. Then you can start talking about all the other aspects that are within the Galway transportation strategy.
But hold on, Seán. I mean, you know, even the department, even the best estimates are that we're going to have the ring road built by 2025. That's the best. The worst estimates are considerably longer than that, and I think most people realistically think, you know, it's going to take a little bit longer than 2025 if that's the best estimate.
It depends.
So are we going to be stuck with this traffic congestion and worsening situation until 2025?
Well, you're not going to build a light rail system before that either, even if it was
absolutely
planned,
not.
You know, so I mean, there's no quick fix on any of these things. The Galway City Ring Road, as I said about the Greenway as well, if we get planning permission, it'll be built. You know, if we don't get planning permission, well then it won't. But there's in terms of other solutions, the Galway City Transportation Strategy, you know, has been passed, as Peter has said, by both city and county councils. I know the NTA are coming down to city council, I think in early September. Right. There are about 40 different, if you like, interventions as part of that are going to be rolled out and funded. And I know the city council want a 5-year commitment from the NTA in relation to funding for those proposals. Some of them are your bus lanes, some of them will involve CPOs, and there are certain pinch points and different things like that. Some of them are easier interventions, and I think that they will be achieved. So I mean, that is the vision supported by government that the city and county councils have, passed by both groups, and I think that will happen. Some of that will include bus corridors, some of it will include improved cycle lanes. I know the city council are recruiting a team of 7 engineers for that to be funded by the NTA, and they hope to have a full team by October to roll out some of these things, including the Salmon Weir pedestrian bridge alongside the Salmon Weir. So there are a lot of plans, slower than any of us would like, but there are things progressing and moving.
Okay, so Seán, just to move on, Niall, for a second, I've got a question directly related to the bypass in Malady and Dangan. So I'll start off with you, Seán, then Pauline, then Peter. So she said, I would like to know what the panel think of the situation where 47 households are left in limbo as they are in the dark regarding the timing of the bypass. Now I know somebody mentioned August the 30th or 31st, but we've been given other dates and they've kind of rolled over into the next quarter. So I wouldn't have an awful lot of faith in that happening then. Remembering the fact that this went on from 1999, when the original bypass was suggested, to 2015. It ruined lives and continues to do so now. People cannot sell their homes while the threat of CPOs, that's compulsory purchase orders, hang over them, as only someone taking a sponsor will buy them at vastly reduced prices. So what the lady is saying basically is that they can't sell their homes, Seán. They're in limbo. They can't do anything with them. And if they were to sell their homes, they'd sell them at vastly reduced prices. So what would you say to those 47 householders?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're going through the planning process at the moment. The further information request, which was expected from Galway City Council or by Galway County Council, is being replied to. We expect an oral hearing in the autumn, and after that, a decision to be made. Part of the delays, the previous application was in relation to court challenges, and we have nothing. I suppose we cannot interfere in the judiciary in terms of the length of time it takes to make decisions. They're certainly an independent body. I know. Since 2018, there is a judge that is appointed now specifically to deal with applications of a strategic infrastructure nature. I think it's Judge Barneville. I think has been appointed by the courts to deal specifically with cases that are delayed under strategic infrastructure. So that is a progress in terms of making decisions. You're right, nobody wants to be left in limbo. If the bypass is to be rejected, and I hope it isn't, but if it is to be, we need to get that done and sorted. I hope it's granted. I hope we can see it progress, but people deserve to have, to know the information as quickly as possible.
Like it's been going on for 4 years, and we've all followed it and been involved in whatever, and there have been these deadlines given. There are constant deadlines given, and it's always the next quarter, And as I said, then, I mean, as you say, if there are challenges, it's quite likely it could go to the Supreme Court, and then if it doesn't pass that, it could go off to Europe. And given the fact that, what's the figure for carbon emissions, Niall? Of a new road?
The figure is, I think, 37% increase is what the Arab report says. So my question is, with EU directives and the fact that we're so, obedient to the EU and stuff, if they come in and say no?
Well, I mean, there are already carbon emissions from the cars and the congestion that we have, and what government policy under the Climate Action Plan that we've launched in the last number of weeks is in relation to banning the sale of diesel and petrol cars by 2030 for new cars, that no diesel and petrol cars can pass an NCT by 2045. So there is a move towards electric and hybrid cars. We had trains and trams in Galway in the past of a higher level than we have now. The arrival of the motor car didn't. It's an awful shame that they actually cancelled the rail line itself. Should have been great. Which rail line? The one that went all the way out.
Yeah, Peter, you want to get in there?
I couldn't agree more. There is a process, and to answer the question directly, Mike, look, our hearts go out, and we regret very much that anybody has to suffer with regard to a planning process which involves trying to solve our traffic gridlock. I'm committed to the process. Like the Minister, I'm an advocate and have been of a Galway City Ring Road for a long number of years. But obviously my heart goes out to anyone who loses their home. That's not what any of us want in terms of this process. But it is going through a process, and the timing is an issue with that. Yeah. I met with Orup during the week, as the Minister correctly says. They're happy that they can deal with what's on the further information request that Brolcháin have raised, and that will be replied to by the end of August. They are now pushing out the timelines for an oral hearing to the first quarter of 2020. And I would ask that the Court of Public Opinion would have their say when the oral hearing is had. And I would invite as many people who are caught in traffic day and night in the city to come along and have their say at that oral hearing. If I could just go back to one thing that the Minister has dealt with there. And all three of us here would be very much in favour of greenways. We're very much in favour of getting children on their bicycles, using it as a method to get to school, and parents to bring their kids to town during the day or whatever. We're all in favour of that. We're receiving a report tomorrow in Galway City Council in relation to the Sauline to Cllr Strand works. That is a project, a coastal protection work to include a walkway, a greenway, which will extend Salthill Promenade from effectively the old driving range, Mike, as you would know it in Salthill, out as far as Cllr Strand, by protecting the Knocknagonin drumlins, by creating the same sort of rock armour as you see directly adjacent to the golf club on the promenade at the moment. Galway City Council enjoys a planning permission from the highest authority in the land, on Bord Pleanála, since 2007 to carry out those works. And now we have a situation where National Parks and Wildlife are putting up their hands and saying, no way, this is not going to happen. You're not going to proceed with this. We're going to object to this at every single corner. Notwithstanding the fact that we enjoy a planning permission, it is a project in the order of about €15 million, a stated objective, I might say, in our current development plan. And we're to receive a report tomorrow from Consultants RPS that will say no. Galway City Council cannot proceed with that plan, notwithstanding that you have planning permission for it, because of the transposition of the Habitats Directive into Irish law, and we have government departments squabbling with each other, watchdogs such as NPWS and others who are now having their say. So let's draw a parallel between that and a potential planning permission we may get for the Galway City Outer Ring Road. Let's say that process goes to a judicial review. And the panel members are absolutely correct. We have no control on the judiciary as to when they may deal with that judicial review. Let's say then it goes to, notwithstanding the fact that judges have been appointed, and the Minister is absolutely correct in that, but let's say then it goes to Europe. Like, very best case scenario, I'm saying 2028, which is why the Galway Transportation Strategy, which has 40 or so provisions or more, including the Galway City Centre Transportation Management Plan, which is a radical plan. I don't accept that it's not a radical plan, because it is. It looks at prioritising routes from the university, Mike, bus routes through the hospital, bus routes, sole bus route priority from University Road right through Eyre Square at AM and PM peak times, if we don't even get planning for a bypass. So it takes in that contingency, which is absolutely huge. But if you look at the Greenway, we have a planning permission for a Greenway. Now we can't proceed with it because of National Parks and Wildlife. Again, I'm going to say to the Court of Public Opinion, what do you want in relation to this? Because I'll be calling on the manager tomorrow, and I hope I receive support on this, that we go ahead and start those works based on the existing planning permission we have and take our chances.
The worrying thing there, Peter, is you said that it could be 2028. It
could be.
This happens.
Can I just come in there? And
years.
a couple of things there. The Minister did say that there's no easy solutions, and I disagree with that. There's actually lots of easy solutions, and none of those easy solutions have been put in place. We have.
Can you give us a few examples?
We have cycling lanes that stop before they get to roundabouts, for instance. It means that children cannot use our cycle lanes. There are cycle lanes there put in at cost, and children can't actually use them. We have 5% of people who are cycling, but actually a fraction of those are children. The majority of those are men in their 30s, and a lot of people feel really, really unsafe. People say to me, I've moved over from London, I've moved over from Dublin, I cycled there, but I don't feel safe cycling in what is potentially one of the best cities in Ireland for cycling, because it's completely flat, and it's a small city centre. We had the city bike scheme that was supposed to go to Salthill. That seems to have been cancelled, according to the service manager on that. And that's a perfect distance, slightly too long to walk, but perfect to cycle. There's also no place to park up your bike in a lot of cases. And to go back to the point about it not being radical enough, when I say it's not radical enough, we're still using Eyre Square as the hub for everything, instead of using the Quincentennial Bridge to get people on public transport across that. That's not part of the transport strategy to use that for public transport. That doesn't make any sense to anyone that I speak to who actually is in the difficult position of having to get across to work. Why would you go into Eyre Square when you want to get to Parkmore? It doesn't make any sense.
It's simple maths, and we've received the presentations from Brian Connolly in Brolcháin, and indeed it is the NTA, as I understand it, that grant the licences. We don't, as a local authority, grant licences for bus companies to run buses on routes, but Brolcháin will tell you that they're not going to put buses on Quincentennial Bridge because it's not financially viable to do so. It may work from 8 o'clock in the morning until 9:30, it may work from 5 to 6:30, but it won't work during the day, and they're not prepared to do it. In fact, the NRA have granted a licence to a private bus company to run a bus service, and this is something that Pauline and I in particular would have heard every day on the doors in Knocknacarra. Why don't you run a bus route across Quincentennial Bridge? Quite frankly, we provide the hardware. We can do it. We put a bus lane in there tomorrow, but they won't use it. The bus companies will not put buses on it. Brolcháin have said we're not going to do it under the current climate. And, why do we use Eyre Square? Because they've actually proven, and we've received presentations of Galway City Council on this, that to take a bus from Knocknacarra to Eyre Square and onwards to Parkmore, in effect is only something like between 500 and 700 metres further, if you're to actually draw it out on the ground, or would take, given bus priority on the routes, would take you maybe 3 or 4 minutes longer.
I'll tell you that a lot of the reason for it comes down to money, and we know that the government are spending 80% on roads versus 20% on public transport, and the reality is that yes, things do cost money. You have to provide services in order to see that people will use those services, and some services are going to cost more money. It's going to cost more money to put on bus services from Moycullen, from Barna. People can't get a bus back to Barna when they've gone to the theatre in the evening, for instance, because they don't go out that late. It does cost more money, but that's where we actually need to be investing our money.
Yeah, and I've had recent meetings with Brolcháin and City Direct in relation to their plans, and I mean, Brolcháin are improving the service now via Barna out to Carrow and Letchermullen, and they're looking at similar in relation to Moycullen to Cllr. So those are positives. In relation to the bike scheme that were rolled out during our terms in government, and we're proud of those. Now, there has been an initial expansion, and there's no reason why there couldn't be further expansion. What happened in Dublin was they didn't put in all the different bike stations at the one time. They put in phase 1, and they put in phase 2 and phase 3, and they expanded that. And there's no reason why that cannot happen in Galway. There's no reason why the application cannot be made in terms of progressing to South Hill, Knocknacarra. There's no reason why there shouldn't be.
Could pressure not be put on Lord Ross as Minister for Transport to basically say, look, we want a bus across the Quincentennial Bridge?
Well, it's up to the NTA to decide where the bus routes go, and as Peter has stated, there has been a licence granted. I was supportive of City Direct. I believe it's for that application a number of years ago, just an ordinary letter of support as requested. So I mean, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. The transport strategy is the solution. And I mean, that has been progressed, that has been agreed, there are actions, and as I said, the team will be in place by October in the City Council to drive that and to put in the solutions. In relation to, as Pauline said, in relation to people cycling, there are huge challenges at roundabouts, and this is why, and even though it's not that popular at times, this is why the progress has been made in taking out roundabouts and putting in traffic lights, and funding has been provided for the Martin roundabout near the clinic under the urban fund as well, and that is to ensure that it is safer for pedestrians, it is safer for cyclists. That's why the one at the Minnow Park, although controversial, is going ahead as well, and that will improve the safety of pedestrians and cyclists to make it a friendly.
So just to throw a question over to Peter, as a councillor for 10 years, Peter, isn't it? That's right. So basically the question would be on a bus route from, say, Barna, Salthill, all the way through to Parkmore, because as you know, with brilliant planning in Galway, all the houses seem to be on one side and all the businesses on the other side. Is there a plan for a direct
That's correct, and there is. Just one of the, and we mentioned earlier on that the Galway City Centre Transport Management Plan will include short, medium and long-term solutions to our traffic woes. Let's concentrate just on the bus part of that for a minute. Galway City at the moment, we've 12 bus routes in the city, so there's 12 routes throughout the city. The plan will seek to reduce that to 5 routes, so that you have, and with that, then the infrastructure that goes with that is that we will grant as a local authority, because we can only provide we have the canvas.
Right.
We don't give out the license and all that. So we'll be asked to prioritise bus routes on those 5 routes. And you're reducing from 12 to 5, and you will have under the plan an orbital bus route then.
So there'll be
The objective of which will be at the end of the day that no house, whether they're in Cllr or whether they're on the upper Ballymoney Road in Gael, and Pauline and I will have got this from estates up there, there's no bus passing our gate. No residents in Knocknacarra or beyond will be more than 5 minutes walk from a bus stop. And if we can convince people, you see at the moment we can't, we're trying to convince people on a daily basis to the modal shift. Come out of your cars and get onto buses, but we can't when there's no frequency, there's no reliability, there's no bus shelters. I mean, the NRA, the NTA, TII refused funding to our local authority in April for funding for 10 bus shelters. This is a city where last year we had 286 days of rain.
Yeah,
so if we can't, if we can't provide the hardware, if we can't provide the structure, so you're right to ask, does it include? Of course, it's radical in that you might say, well, reducing it from 12 to 5, it's making it more efficient, Mike.
Yeah,
and that's the long and short of it. So that's contained as a medium-term solution in the plan.
So is that in there, do you think?
No, it'll go. The plan is that Ayr Square will be the bus interchange.
Okay.
So as I've said earlier on, they've run the models on it. If you grant the priority on the roadways and you run buses from Salthill, Knocknacarra, to Ayr Square and onwards to Parkmore on the east side of the city, they have shown it can work once you give priority to the buses and it has frequency and reliability on the routes.
Okay. So one last one thing to go on this, just while we're talking about it, and then we might bring in the public here, because we've been lucky enough to bring in a few people with us as well. I'll make this quick. So do you not think in a way that Galway has gone for putting all its eggs in the basket of the bypass? And should we not look at different solutions? What about more short term, Sean? I mean, there's an awful lot of different solutions, like T3.
Well, if I could just add to that, Mike, it strikes me from listening to the various politicians here that, there's broad agreement on a lot of stuff, actually, and I know that from the past. I mean, there is broad agreement on a lot of the solutions. I mean, things like bus shelters you were talking about. There's no politician, I don't think any of you disagreed that there should be bus shelters put in place. And it's not beyond the capability of politicians or indeed the councils to do that. It shouldn't be.
Well, we've actually gone ahead and done it, and now we're going to roll out 10 bus shelters on routes that we know will be included in those 5 bus routes. And in fairness, the government have now propped up the money, and those bus shelters will be in place by the end of the year.
So again, just in terms of the figure that we saw earlier, 5% of people in the city cycle. Most university cities the size of Galway, you're talking about double figures. You're talking about high double figures in some cases, places like Oxford and Cambridge. That would have a radical change in relation to the number of cars on the road. Sure. We all know that. It's not rocket science. And there's little measures, inexpensive measures that can allow that to happen. So what's slowing them up?
For example, the NTA have advised Galway City Council to submit under the Urban Development Fund in the next application for funding over the viaducts on the River Corrib. So to have a extension of the Greenway cycle route, all of that. So that has been actively looked at by Brendan McGrath and the team there as well. It'll be part of that. That'll be part of the solution. The university has a nice walkway that will be form part of the Greenway further out. Could easily be progressed, and that is part of the application for the planning permission that RPS consultants are engaging at the moment, taking longer than one would like, but the application for planning will go in, and unfortunately is likely to be challenged by landowners and homeowners, as is their right, in the Mycollen area and further on, but I certainly hope that can be progressed.
So Pauline, as the newest councillor here, could I ask you that, do you think there's a reason to maybe try other solutions? I mean, Peter has alluded to the fact that it could be 2018 before the bypass comes in. 2020, sorry, if it was 2018, we wouldn't be here. Sorry, but thank you for correcting me. So 2028, right, at the earliest. So what other solutions short term could be used? I mean, one certainly is park and ride, and this has been brought up for years, and the thing is, I think park and ride is a bit like turkeys and Christmas, that we have it once a year and everybody says, isn't that fantastic, and then we leave it again and it's used a bit for the races. What if we had about 4 hubs, Peter? If we use like Barna, Mycollen, Tuam, Moore.
Yeah. I mean, park and ride is essential, and that's has to be part of the solution. It is, to be fair, it is part of the Galway transport strategy, but that's something that could happen immediately. Yeah. And we could see a huge transformation with that. Not only that, but having an integrated ticketing system so that people can can use all the different forms of transport is something that could be done quite easily and effectively. As I say, if we had every child could actually get to school using a bicycle, it would be good for their health, which actually overall cuts down on the cost of health services. That's an important point to make, and it would also mean that you're cutting down on cars, because it isn't just about let's move the cars out of the city so it'll make more space. The point is that you don't have the cars. That's the whole point of a transport solution, is that you don't have the cars. You don't need to move them necessarily. You just need to move people onto something else. You need to make it easier, cheaper, faster. So you need to cut down the cost of all of the buses. And it isn't just about, well, we granted a license but they didn't take it up. We actually have to put grant money in to fund that, to help those companies, not leave it up to the capitalist market. It's a different system that we need to be looking at. That's what we're looking at in all of the different European cities.
Yeah, could I just get back to something we alluded to earlier? I think, Pauline, you raised the issue of planning. Do you know, we're looking for Galway City to increase by about 20% over the coming years in size. Do you know, and the way we actually put in housing, and the way we put in, we do our planning, obviously is going to be crucial to whether we end up far more congested or whether we manage to solve the problems and at least contain it. For example, if we build a lot of properties within walking distance of places of work, we've seen that there's sort of a 23%, according to the 2011 census, 23% of people walk to college, walk to school, walk to work, which is a huge number, and it's forgotten about. Do you know what I mean? It's such a huge way that people on a day-to-day basis actually get their transport. But the point I'm trying to make, if we had a sort of, I suppose, plan in place that, when we're building properties, for example, could we build them sort of as much in the city and maybe sort of high-rise properties, taller properties, rather than this sprawl, which seems to be the thing which is actually leading to the problem? I mean, is planning not a crucial issue in the whole thing?
Absolutely, and there are a number of strategic sites within the city, particularly Kent Station and the docks lands that will be, I think, pivotal in terms of the whole delivery of high-rise developments within the city centre, quality high-rise developments within the city centre, and we have to see how those develop in terms of the planning. I know they've held consultations recently. We've known the university is looking at the Nuns Island site, and they've held consultation there. I think it was last weekend or 2 weeks ago that I attended. So we have to look at the strategic sites within our city centre, and what can be done. You could argue, for example, that Bohermore, which is at present very low density, could see, it's very close to the city centre, could see an increase in density of housing in terms of apartments, and I think there is potential there, notwithstanding obviously that people have their properties and it would have to be buy-in to the local community there. But I think that is one of the most strategic areas in terms of the potential to grow and develop and to see an increase in population in prime city centre locations.
Yeah, we had a presentation on Dyke Road there at the last council meeting, my first council meeting, and it was a shock to me that the council were actually looking at selling off council land to be used for potentially, it was the first one, potentially for hotels or office space in that, instead of theatre, and instead of what I think is hugely important is having people living in the city. Anyone who's canvassed, and I've canvassed the city centre myself last year for a referendum, and there's so few people who are living there. You're going long distances before you get between residencies. Part of that as well is there's an Airbnb issue in the city. Hopefully we'll see a change to that, but there also needs to be implementation of the legislation around Airbnb. And yes, we do need to use council land for the benefit of people, and look at our city centre as a living organism. I again would go back to, I think that if we look at Wood Quay and we actually have a park there, which I know the residents have really put a huge amount of work into planning that, and I'd be really in favour of that, so that it's not just a consumerist city centre, but it's a place where people can actually spend time outdoors, want to live there, want to bring up children. It's not all about housing students in the city centre. It has to be a mix of people of all ages, all abilities. We need to provide for people with disabilities as well in the city centre. That goes back again to the pedestrian issue, the funding that's been made available for, I suppose, some projects, but not actually fixing the footpaths, which I think is a no-brainer if you want people to use the city.
I think that the enhancement and further creation of public realm space is huge, and I think in the context of the Dyke Road, which again is a very strategic site in the city, and we have very, very strategic locations and strategic sites within the city that we must look at, but we cannot be blinkered in terms of, okay, let's build housing everywhere. This local authority enjoys residentially zoned land on hundreds of hectares of land that are suitable for housing. The high-rise restriction is now gone under the current development plan. The next development plan will be along very, very shortly, and we will get opportunities, both Pauline and I, to contribute to that plan and change methods by which applications are made for planning permission, because there is a process. So anyone wishing to apply for planning permission, whether it's for a high-rise or a one-off, must comply with the provisions of the development plan. And that is one of the two functions that both Pauline and I will have in Galway City in any given year, is to deal with the development plan and to deal with the city budget. So that's the power that we have, and as I understand, the Minister now has a veto on a lot of decisions that are made with regard to the development plan. But just to get back to a point that Seán made, and he's absolutely right, that there are strategic sites, and I think Galway City Council Planning Department have made very brave decisions in recent months with regard to planning permissions. The Bonham Quay development, for example, which will provide over 300,000 square feet of grade A office space. And the IDA and Enterprise Ireland will tell you that there is still demand for that in Galway. And we're looking at cities like Cork and Limerick who are ploughing ahead of us in terms of foreign direct investment, in terms of populating their city centres with the correct type of business to drive the city forward. So we have the McDonagh site, another site that a very brave decision was made on planning. So we are moving forward with that, but I would urge caution with regard to where we're going to build houses everywhere. It's very much part of the Greenway plan to use the viaducts, to bring the Connemara Greenway into that Dyke Road and create a public ground space in Wood Quay and the old plots, as the people would know it. But we need to be strategic in how we do that, Mike.
Sure. Well, we're going to have another debate on housing, in a few weeks' time. But at this stage, I'd like to bring in a couple of questions from the floor on traffic itself. So would anybody like to ask a question? Dave Hamilton?
Well, you got close to it at the end, and I'm ignoring or putting aside the city centre issues.
Sorry, just make the point that we probably can't hear you on the microphone. So if you just come up to the
pulpit.
So this is Dave Hamilton, obviously from West Connemara by the accent.
Okay.
No, I was just wondering, have there ever been plans or strong incentives to create jobs west of the city and housing estates east of the city? Because I thought of, even before you brought it up an hour ago, but I mean, so many people live west, all the new housing is west, and all the jobs are east. And
then we've got the schools as well.
Yeah. Well, is there any?
I think the Minister might be the best person to answer that one.
Oh, well, I'm sure we're all.
You're all
equally keen.
Sorry for putting you on the spot there, Seán. Thank you very much.
You're right, Dave. I mean, I suppose the area that has been identified in terms of the most potential in relation to new housing in Galway is actually the Ardon corridor, which is obviously east of the city. That's near the intersection of the motorway, near the clinic. That is the area that is identified, and I know Peter will probably be able to say more in relation to the local area plan for that and the progress on that. So that is the biggest focus in relation to new development, and it transcends both city and county. Some of the lands are city, some of the lands are county, and that's important as well in terms of delivery. In relation to jobs west of the city, I know there are IDA lands in Knocknacarra. I suppose the potential growth of those is dependent on getting suitable companies to come in, and you'll find that one of the challenges of getting new investment in relation to IDA lands, the first challenge is to get them into the country. Second challenge might be to get them west of the Shannon, and after that they have a big say in terms of where they want to go. And a lot of cases they want to go where there's a cluster effect. They want to go where there's obviously a population basis as well, and that is a challenge. We would all love, and I know as a former county councillor, the amount of people that the councillors there that want to see investment in Ballinasloe or Tuam or areas like that. Doesn't all have to be in the city. There are other areas in the county as well, and of course west of the city. We've seen a recent decision by a global company that wants to move from Inverden into the city. We regret that, but that's a decision that they felt that they wanted to make in terms of their future and their future job creation and growth and expansion. And the possibility there was that we'd lose that company entirely from Galway to Dublin or elsewhere. So those are the challenges. We want to encourage more development in places where people live and where need jobs. I mean, we'd love to see development in further out west in Kyne, Cllr, where there is an unemployment, it's an unemployment black spot, where we want to see growth and development. But to get people and to get companies to invest, so far away, it can be a challenge.
And Seán, what about Ardon itself? I mean, that's been there and debated about for years and years. What's going to happen with that? Is there any short-term plan?
When the local area plan has been published, maybe Peter.
The local area plan has been published for Ardon. Just to get with that point that you were making, that there is a difficulty even in attracting foreign direct investment over to the west of the city, because the difficulty in commuting to the east of the city and to the east of the country, where most of the business is done, is so difficult at present. And that is why we're hamstrung in terms of our ability to deliver to the west of the city. But I can tell you there is adequately zoned land for industry and commerce, commercial, industrial. There's adequately zoned land in Knocknacarra, and I'm sure the IDA and Enterprise Ireland are working very hard at attempting to attract those industries over there, so that people who live, I was shocked at the amount of people when I knocked on doors in Knocknacarra who commute to Parkmore on a daily basis. And it would make perfect sense that a lot of those industries would be relocated to the Knocknacarra area. There is zoned land there, but there are challenges, as the Minister correctly pointed out. There are challenges with trying to attract them to there. But all we can do as a local authority is make sure that we provide the canvas, that we provide the lands for them to do it. In relation to the Ardon plan, again, that's a very exciting plan, Mike. That's the local area plan has been published. It envisages something like over 3,500 residents between, as the viewers and the members of the panel here will know, between sort of the clinic and Galway Airport, in that area of land there. So the local area plan has been published. It will come back before us again, the new council, and that will move forward.
Sorry, Pauline.
Just on the Ardon there, I mean, that's an example of a successful local area plan, except for the fact that nothing has actually been developed there. But the plan
is in place. Just nothing there.
The plan is in place, but it's all privately owned land, predominantly privately owned land. So you're reliant then on it being developed privately. One thing that we can do as councillors is to develop local area plans. Like that's one of the key. That's one of the key strengths that we have on a council, and there has been a lack of those. To be fair, local area plans for the city centre, for instance, for the west of the city, which is the reason for the kind of development that we've seen. Because without a local area plan, that explains how many houses you need, what zoning for different land, how many schools you need. Then what you really have is a developer-led system, and that's, in my view, that's why we have this problem. So I think that some of it can be corrected by having new local area plans.
What we've seen, if you look at the trends in terms of education over the last period of time, the amalgamation of the two city schools, the Present, the Mercy, and the possible now further amalgamation with St Mary's, the Bish moving out further west. We've seen new schools created in Cllr, Galway. So there has been an attempt to create new facilities so people won't have to commute in, but that is also having an impact now on the city centre schools and causing them to further amalgamate or to move further out. So we don't want to end up with a situation where you have no educational facilities in the heart of the city that will actually trying to encourage people to live in the city and to get education further out.
And that's why I think it's really, really important in terms of Nuns Island, and you mentioned it earlier on, why we need to bring the university, the campus of the university, further into the city. and I think that's why they have a pivotal part to play in the Dyke Road redevelopment. The university, I think, in conjunction with Greenway, further creation of public ground space. But I think we need to drag this university, and we're sitting on campus here today. We need to drag it more into the city centre.
Yeah, and I mean the expertise within the university is enormous. I mean, it is one of the best universities in the world. It's in the top 1%. There's a lot of people who get very frustrated in the university, and they tend to focus their transport, transport efforts on cities like Barcelona or other countries, rather than Galway, because there doesn't seem to be that sort of tie-up or engagement at a city and a university level.
There will be now.
There will be now. I love it.
Riley now has been nominated to represent us on the other also.
Now there's a solution in itself. Make use of the experts that exist within the city.
And this, I was at a debate with the women in the university, and I suppose crucially what there has been is people not feeling engaged in any of the processes, in any, from the academics, from children in schools, from families, and it's a participation that happens much earlier in the process. That this goes back to the transport. We know what the problems are because we actually experience them on a daily basis. Peter and I will know because we've been knocking on the doors exactly what is the current problem, but actually it's trying to reach out to people where they are so that they feel engaged in the process before they're presented with a plan, and it's a tick box exercise. That consultation is going to be crucial now going forward, particularly when we're looking at an expansion, that the government are looking at an expansion of 50% in the population of Galway by 2040.
Well, first of all, Dave, thanks very much for the question. Any more questions on the floor?
No. I